Be advised, Blue Rose Task Force is filled with secrets and spoilers.
Welcome back to the Blue Rose Task Force podcast, where we look deeply into Twin Peaks as a whole, one episode at a time, using the full scope of the show Twin Peaks and all its official media. We don't use the word canon, but we consider all official releases important because Lynch and Frost have approved their presence. And we welcome all input into the collective consciousness that is the Twin Peaks community and wider universe. This podcast is a watch-along podcast for those who've seen all of Twin Peaks, including the third season, which we consider as we go along. Today, we are looking at the 7th overall episode of Twin Peaks, Episode 6, often known, depending where you look, as Season 1, Episode 7, or what the German regionalization team named Realization Time. I'm your host, John. In Episode 6, Cooper lets Audrey down in the classiest way possible, then enlists the Bookhouse Boys to invest Jock at One-Eye Jack's while Doc Hayward and Harry try to get Waldo to talk. Maddie, James, and Donna listen to one of Laura's therapy tapes, and Audrey smokes through her boss Emery's meeting with Jenny, then steals a unicorn and gets the number for Blackie O'Reilly from Jenny. Cooper and Harry have a present of a cup of coffee at the Double R. Nadine's shut down at the patent office. Catherine doesn't sign a life insurance policy. And Audrey keeps missing Cooper, so she goes to One-Eye Jack's on her own. Leo kills Waldo instead of Bobby. Cooper and Ed get disguised to meet Blackie. And Cooper finally meets Jock, while Audrey gets a new job by tying a cherry stem. All this while, Maddie impersonates Laura so James and Donna can break into Jacoby's office for Laura's missing tape. And a secret someone watches Maddie from the trees. So, after watching all of Twin Peaks from 1990 and 91 and all of Twin Peaks from 2017, we're going to look at how we see things differently. And we're going to see what questions we're left with now. So the first one will be, what boundaries do the investigations cross? And that means all of them, all the kinds of boundaries. How do the investigations reveal what characters want and need? And how is Laura Palmer's presence invoked? Okay, to start with, we are going to go back into the history of what it was like during the production of this episode. Episode 6 was the second episode written by Harley Peyton and the first directed by Caleb Deschanel. Now, at this point, Peyton hadn't been made a producer yet. That was between seasons 1 and season 2 over the summer. But Frost was so happy with the way episode 3 turned out, and they're writing them in sequential order, that the first thing Frost said to him is, "Great, come back and do number 6. Now, according to Peyton from Essential Wrapped in Plastic by John Thorne, the network was, that network being ABC, barely looked at the scripts in season 1, and Peyton basically says that's what networks are supposed to do. That's their jobs. And he basically said they had no idea what to do with us. As far as the story structure, in the artist and DVD commentaries, Peyton said Frost had Twin Peaks inside his head, and he said it like this: he was the one person on set. Every set needed this one person that kept everyone on track, particularly with the first season. Now, I have some of Peyton's thoughts throughout this episode, but I'm going to move on to Caleb Deschanel. Now, Deschanel went to AFI at the same time as Lynch did. That's American Film Institute. And per his wife, Mary Jo Deschanel, she said the directors would give lectures at the old Greystone Mansion, and all was very casual, and it was, Terrence Malick was part of this, and everybody, it seemed like, to be a fly on the wall listening to those lectures would be very informative. Um, now, Deschanel and Lynch didn't really keep in touch too deeply at this point, but Deschanel had directed a lot of commercials, but no television. Um, how Deschanel got connected, besides his early days with Lynch, um, Mary Jo Deschanel got cast first, and so she was Eileen Hayward, so they all were able to go to the screening of the pilot, and Caleb at the end of, after the viewing, Caleb said, "David, it's great." And then Lynch said, "Oh, you want to direct one of them?" And it was pretty much that simple. So yeah, I kind of wonder if it was the same screening that Peyton went to where he got the job from Mark Frost. Um, so like, did these two guys get the job at the same time? Who knows? But Deschanel had this to say about the actual production of Twin Peaks in the first season. Getting it all done in the time allotted is the challenge. If you move the camera too much, you lose the subtext, and the subtext is the most important part of the show. Figuring out the fears of the characters is also important. So that kind of explains his mentality about how he approached things. One thing that he knew for sure he wanted to do was he knew that the donuts were a very iconic part of the show at this point, and the Waldo being over them and the blood dripping on the donuts, that was completely his idea. There's one particular scene where the camera starts on the Hayward piano and it pans over and you start to see Maddie and then you start to see Donna and then you see like everything but James's head for a while and then he's revealed. Um, he's Deschanel said it's cinematography in the sense that you show an image and then you're keeping the audience in the dark a little bit until you reveal what's going on. The whole show was very much like that. There was a lot of secrets and or there were a lot of secrets, as secrets are dangerous. And one of the big secrets was how Deschanel didn't know who killed Laura. So, I mean, he's the one who ended up filming. Remember when Maddie walks down the stairs and it's the dark of the Palmer house, and then like from the living room, like Leland turns his head so his face is in the light, and it's very creepy and it's very, I mean, it's pretty disturbing, especially knowing what we know in the future. But Deschanel had a good attitude about that. He basically said in the Mark Altman book, Twin Peaks Behind the Scenes, he said it's not really a problem. And he was saying this about the gag order, about, keeping secrets in season 2, but it really applies here. He says, sometimes you can find that you add things to the show without knowing anything that contributes to the mystery, and it makes it that much better. And this is definitely one of those moments. Now, some context from 1990. Um, I can see why people wouldn't be quite so, like, oh, the smoke would come out of the closet, blah blah blah, about Audrey smoking during during the meeting between Emery and Jenny. It's like these days there is no smoking, but I saw a VHS video from one of my companies, or the company I work for, their one of their meetings from, I believe it was somewhere between 88 and 91 when they filmed this. And I don't know why, but it's like this boring meeting with like a bunch of people around a table, except every single one of them was smoking. So the fact that there might be fresh smell of Emery's brand of cigarette, because that's what Audrey was smoking, in the same office as Emery and Jenny, um, I don't think that would be quite the tip off that it would be today. Now, from an acting standpoint, Sherilyn Fenn was told by Deschanel to play the closet scene so that Audrey doesn't have to worry about being discovered, that it can never happen, and that she just understands that, like, she'll never be caught. So between the fact that there's like this sort of dreamy quality, like maybe maybe Audrey's being a strong sender in this moment, who knows? But between that and the culture of the day, it totally makes sense that that can happen the way it did. And another thing about that scene in particular, I was listening to the Lodgers podcast, and they were talking. They had a guest on who was asking, like, were the viewers supposed to have noticed the connections to Blue Velvet? And I mean, the answer is not really. Um, it's like there's at that point, I mean, not even, Lynch's work was not really that well known at the time. I mean, the Mark Altman book I just mentioned that was published in December of 1990, um, I don't even think it mentions Eraserhead by name. I mean, Eraserhead didn't gather the reputation it did until sometime between Fire Walk with Me and Lost Highway. So I don't think the common person, it's like Elephant Man and Blue Velvet were talked about. I think Elephant Man was the one that everybody really knew about more than anything. And that Blue Velvet was like this 3-year-old curiosity of like, like, ooh, I hear that one's spicy or tawdry or, like whatever the word is. So like the common people weren't really meant to see it that way. But it's more like the creators doing it. So I mean, I think that Deschanel was referencing Blue Velvet there, but it was the same thing as like the insurance guy talking to Catherine this episode, Walter Neff, who's the same name as Fred McMurray's character from Billy Wilder's Double Indemnity. Things like that. And Waldo, the bird from Waldo Lydecker, who okay, you see how they split the name up there with the vet, Bob Lydecker. Um, but that's a character from Preminger's Laura from 1944. So yeah, it's like they throw in references to things and they honestly don't care if anybody catches them. That said, it did end up becoming a nice doubling of Lynch's work. And yeah, I mean, there's no wonder why now everybody associates Lynch's film work with Twin Peaks. Anyway, the end result for this episode is that it aired on May 17th, 1990. It's the last time it aired on a Thursday for a long time because next week they'll put it on Wednesdays for sweeps purposes. And the ratings are 15.7 million viewers, which is down a lot from the week before's 17.3. But between the 2 weeks before holding out at about 17, um, the drop might have changed things about where they placed it on the schedule, but ABC basically did renew it this exact week. They announced that the season 2 would be happening and that it would be happening on Saturdays. So I'm kind of wondering if this dip made the on Saturdays part or if they already had it kind of figured out that they weren't sure what to do with this wild card show. Anyway, this night it aired after Father Dowling Mysteries and against the Falcon Crest finale, and it ended up beating the Falcon Crest finale in the ratings. So, per usual, we're going to look into Lynch's final words from, final words from 1993, from the yeah, from the Lynch lady, from the Log Lady intros that aired on the Bravo network during its first run of syndication. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Yet there are those who open many eyes. Eyes are the mirror of the soul, someone has said. So we look closely at the eyes to see the nature of the soul. Sometimes, when we see the eyes, those horrible times when we see the eyes that have no soul, then we know a darkness. Then we wonder, where is the beauty? There is none if the eyes are soulless. So the first thing this makes me think of is the whited out eyes of the doppelgangers from episode 29 in the Red Room sequence. Is there only darkness in those eyes? There's a lack of seeing, like they can't see through just the white because drink full and descend. This is, the horse is the white of the eyes, all that looking away metaphor that will be a little bit more codified as we go. I think in this case it relates more to the voyeurism of this episode, like the scary presence watching Maddie as Laura at the gazebo, the breathing heavy person at the very end of the episode. I kind of feel like that's the darkness that was watching. And it's almost like, what eyes do we see through is kind of um what Margaret's words are implying here. And whose eyes are we seeing through at the very end of this episode? Likely it's Bob's, or, at the minimum, it's Leland's. But it applies to a whole lot more, too. I mean, Leo is watching Shelley and Bobby and Waldo later through binoculars. And that makes me think of Jerry Horn in season 3, where he's like, bad binoculars, so like they're no good. um Audrey is watching from the closets, and like she's literally in a dark place, and she's heading into a metaphorically dark place going to One Eye Jack's. Then there's the camera angle watching the kids, James, Don, and Maddie listening to Laura's tape. There's one point where it backs out so far into the Hayward's living room that it's the shot where Bob walks from behind the scene, all the way over the couch. It's like there's this implication with the camera angle that there's somebody being a voyeur even for them, even if it's just implying that they are being a voyeur into Laura's words. Watching people's secrets. It's this, this untoward behavior, and it ends up leading to truth, in this show usually, but it only gets to the truth by going through the darkness and the transgressive behaviors that everybody does to get to the truths. But yeah, I think Lynch was mostly intending that, if we could see the eyes of the person watching Maddie, it would be eyes that have no soul. Okay, so next we're going to be talking about the scenes of the episode a little more specifically. But before that, we're going to hear some words from our fellow podcast at Ruminations Radio Network.
What's up, gang? This is Hoptimus. You've been listening to one of the great new podcasts from Ruminations Radio Network. If you want some more tasty sound vibes, come check out my new podcast, The Retro Futurist Culture, where we talk about alternate timelines, cyberpunk, anime, and other crazy worlds. If that does not strike your fancy, we have plenty of other great shows at ruminationsradionetwork.com.
All right, welcome back. Now we are going to look at the scenes of this episode using the full context of the show, from all the episodes in 1990 all the way through all the episodes in 2017, including books from time to time. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look into what boundaries do the investigations cross. So the first boundary that gets crossed that we're going to look into is going from public into secret. During the proper investigation into Laura's murder, they're investigating Jacques Renault, but then it comes out that he works at One Eye Jack's, which is over in Canada, and that means there's a border crossing, and that's kind of a problem. And the border crossing itself is a different kind of boundary too, so they can't actually go over there legally. So instead of waiting for the process, Cooper enlists the Bookhouse Boys right then to quickly investigate Laura's murder across the state and national lines. We also get Audrey, who tries to actually talk to Cooper about the case, and it's like, I'm going to be your junior detective. It's he cuts it off. He cuts her off, saying, it's like, okay, great, you got a new job, but I don't have time. She continues to try to get in touch with Cooper to tell him about her secret, her secret investigation into One Eye Jack's, but she never really catches him, so she has to do it on her own. So in by default, it ends up becoming a secret from Cooper too, even though it's accidental. And it wouldn't be Twin Peaks without an inversion of that too. So there's also one particular one that's going from secret to public, and that's the arson plot. We get a fun little detail that Pete says he got his fish trophy back from Tim and Tom's taxidermy, which end up showing up in the access guide late in season two's run, um, which is just a funny little coincidence. I mean, it's a funny little connection that doesn't have anything to do with this scene. But Josie, um, she finally shows up at the Blue Pine Lodge. Uh, Harry is there, and they finally get to talk about why she was at the motel, the in episode 4. And she takes a moment, and then she figures out, you know what? She actually does say that she was taking pictures of her conspirator Ben and the person they're double crossing, Catherine, at the motel. Now, it seems to me that what's actually happening is she's taking those pictures as proof to Harry because she said that he needed proof, but it's also just a frame, to have proof that Ben and Catherine are together and things, and they're probably the ones who burned the mill down. Um, so Ben playing both sides ends up allowing him to be guilty on both sides. And Josie knows this. And I think she's trying to get rid of anybody who could get her into trouble. Now, in this case, she is telling Harry for the first time, and she's telling, everything except for her involvement, as far as the ruse that, Ben is enacting with Catherine. But Harry believes her hook, line, and sinker, of course, because he loves her. And that's what he says to Cooper, too. After Cooper calls him out and basically says, it's like, how much do you know about her? Like, do you know her history? How much of this do you know? Basically, how many of her secrets do you actually know, Harry? And, Cooper just goes with it. He just, Harry's love is enough for him. So, yeah, that particular part drops. But like as far as Josie's intent here, yeah, and Leslie Lincoln Gladder's on record a lot, basically saying that Josie did love Harry for real. Um, yeah, and she's like Josie is basically saying, it's like she's got her lawman who will ride in and save her out of all the machinations she's doing and all the things she's caught up in. But it's not going to work because like even if it does work, Josie got the call that the mill was going to burn tonight from Ben. Ben told her the plan is moving, so basically stay out of town for a little while. um Except who's right there next to her is Hank. So she's still tied into people who have things on her. So even though she's caught up in these secrets and she's trying to get out of the secrets, they are becoming more and more public. So Harry and Hank both know a little bit. We know that they know a little bit more this time of what Josie is thinking. So bringing up the arson plan, that's another boundary that's happening in this episode. The moving from legal to illegal happens here. Okay, so the arson plan, it it goes from the theoretical conspiring that's been happening, um, and this time it's going into motion officially. I've talked about the state lines issue with the Bookhouse Boys, and the kids, James, Maddie, and Donna are listening to Laura's tapes. So like that's kind of on the fence with the patient client. Yeah, but I mean, at least they found it in Laura's house. Um, but then they switched to breaking and entering into Jacoby's office. So yeah, that's absolutely illegal. And then even Bobby goes into the illegal category by framing James with some cocaine in his bike's gas tank. He starts out actually trying to comfort Shelley for a little bit when she is freaking out, and Madchen Amick is putting in an amazing acting performance. But, then he goes into full on Bobby mode, talking in the third person, which kind of, that gives me the impression of like nicknames again, where like he's on a negative frequency. He's talking about himself as a big title. Bobby's going to fix it. He's going to fix Leo. He's going to fix James and everything. And like, why would he bring up James right there with Shelley? This is obviously him stepping away from helping Shelley and doing his own thing. Except then, he goes into the framing business, which doesn't really work out nicely. But probably the biggest transition in terms of how long it's in the story, we get Audrey. I mean, she goes from being a Horns employee to becoming a hospitality girl at One Eye Jack's. So yeah, at the beginning of the episode, Cooper lets her down in the classiest way possible, which she she put herself in a kind of a tricky position in Cooper's bed. And you know, during this conversation, it's pretty apparent that she is able to be herself. It's like she's free to not keep secrets with Dale Cooper. Um, it's like she wants to be the junior detective at at the end of the day, like when she's turned down for her for her proposition to Cooper, um, it's like he basically um wants her to be this amazing woman who can kind of do her own thing. And yeah, what that ends up being like, she feels like the most being herself is to be this detective. She wants to uncover secrets. The first thing she does in Horns this time is she connives her way into Emery's office, where she like takes a cigarette and starts smoking and looking through his things, and then she just goes into the closet when Emery's coming through with Jenny. She's just really happy to get the information, the conversation. Like she now knows what she wants to do next with her investigation. She swipes the unicorn. um she goes through the book of names that Emery has, and then sees Ronette Pulaski with all those hearts. um and she makes that connection that it's Ronette's name, and then she sneakily gets the name of Black, or the number for Black Rose from Jenny using the unicorn. Now about Jenny, Harley Payton in the artisan DVD commentaries, he talked about how as writers, they meant to imply that the day player characters like Jenny, that they were all getting into some kind of trouble and danger, and all were required to be imbued with quirks. So like you're not just going to have a character walk into Twin Peaks and like be this like empty vessel that like has nothing to it and you don't care about them. It's like you want even, the people, anybody who has a line is going to be a character where you can actually see that they're in trouble or able to get into trouble. Like, that's a nice touch for world building. Another world building detail in this, well, in the first horn scene with Audrey, she's being kind of rude to one of the customers, and next to the customer is a cutout of Jade from Invitation to Love, because at one point they were wondering if like maybe they have the cast of Invitation to Love come to Twin Peaks on like some kind of junket. They do a lot of world building, just in this one zone of the Horns department store. But as far as Audrey's behavior in these scenes, she's kind of digging into the dark territory again. She's going down this path that doesn't really lead too well, and she's again. What is this, third episode in a row? She and Hank are mirroring each other. Um, It's like he steals a lighter from the counter, just like Audrey steals a unicorn. Um, Hank gets Big Ed's name out of Shelley. Like, oh, all this help you did, and thanks Shelley for all the help you gave Norma while I was in prison, and and Pete, and then she just says, oh no, no, you must mean Ed, and yeah, so he gets Big Ed's name out of Shelley, just like Audrey goes up to Jenny and says, "Oh, did you get one of these unicorns too?" And it's a funny thing. I lost Black Rose's number, and yeah, so they're both being sneaky in the same kind of way. And obviously, we know that Hank doesn't mean it because later on we see Hank watching Josie get the call about the arson from Ben Horn. And then Audrey's path goes even a little more dark as she continues to miss Cooper. It's like she calls on the Great Northern phone. It's like, has Agent Cooper shown up yet? Slips a note under Cooper's door. But does she wait for him? No, no, she just goes on and does it anyway. It's the same confidence that she had in Emery's closet that she's never going to get caught. She has this confidence going straight to One Eye Jack's as well. And that confidence takes her straight to Blackie's office. It takes her straight to deciding that tying a cherry stem would be the thing that could get her out of this mess of getting shipped all the way back to Twin Peaks. And what does she do instead of that? Well, she signs a contract with Blackie. And that goes into another thing with this episode. There's this boundary of going from the unofficial to official with signatures. Now, Audrey's is kind of a deal with the devil kind of thing with Blackie because, we know that place is up to no good. And here she is getting in with it. And Ben and Jerry are trying to take the Icelanders up to One Eye Jack's to sign the Ghostwood deal as quickly as possible. And there's a couple weird things in the scene. I mean, I know it's just because writers are writing as quickly as possible and they forget all the details, like how Ben Horn suggested when the Icelanders first showed up that maybe they should go to One Eye Jack's. Um, he gets mad at Jerry here about it's like, how do they know about One Eye Jack's? Well, you kind of told them, but that's not what Jerry says. He just says, I accept full responsibility because why call out his brother? Um, and later on, they're actually in a scene with Einar, and they're all eating ice cream together, and that's a funny little meta joke because Ben and Jerry's hadn't quite gone national yet, but they were a local chain that was big enough where the joke was to be had. Now, this episode doesn't actually get the signature from the Icelanders, but it gets them to the point where that is the next logical thing. So, yeah, their plan is coming together. The Horns. I mean, another signature that doesn't happen, but by choice, not just because the scene ends, is when Catherine chooses not to sign the hurried life insurance document. Um, so Caleb Deschanel from the DVD commentaries, he says that both Neff the lawyer and Catherine, they're both speaking like they're being recorded, and it's interesting that Catherine, the one who's like been planning all this arson with Ben, it's like she realizes she's being double crossed, and instead of like falling into the trap of just signing it and then being a pawn, she slows things down and she says think, which is I mean, it's what saves everybody from the darkness when the darkness is looming. And just because you're already in the dark doesn't mean that slowing things down and being part of the moment um you know isn't going to help you. It still will. And I know Audrey's signature, it ends up just saving her bacon in the short term. And it's a super hasty decision. It's like she didn't even know she wanted to do that this morning. And I mean, she was with Cooper that morning, and and then suddenly she's like signing her name to One Eye Jacks, and what does that actually make happen? Besides saving herself in the short term, well, it makes it official that Audrey is basically now living Laura's life. It's like she works at the perfume counter. She works at One Eye Jacks now, which I'm assuming she's connecting the dots that Laura was also there. But because she did it so quickly, she doesn't have backup. Nobody knows where she is, not even her dad, which doesn't really matter in this case because he wouldn't necessarily care. But that's part of the problem. It's like just because she's doing the same things as Laura, just because she's as quick thinking and, we're in the same locations where Laura physically was before she was killed, it doesn't it doesn't exactly help Audrey figure out, how Laura died because it wasn't through the One Eye Jacks thing. And it also doesn't, becoming Laura in occupations doesn't bring along the adoration that came with that came from Laura. It's like all that stuff about Laura, men just like her and blah blah blah. It's like all this stuff that that came to Laura, like all the attention, it isn't here for Audrey because she does nobody does know where she is. It's like um and also like it's not going to make her father love her, and it's not going to make anybody love her or give her all this attention. It's like she's on her own being somebody else. Now the beginning of the episode actually starts with um that Cooper monologue to Audrey that'll make it's like if you had to let somebody down, that's the way to do it because you're verifying like what's great about a person, but also putting an absolute line in the sand why this is a friend zone situation. But in there is that thing about, what I want and what I need are, are two separate things. And it's like that is obviously played a little differently in I think it's part 2 of the 2017 Twin Peaks. And it's like I don't need, I want. Okay, Ray. You know, it's it's an interesting inversion with a way to say like, this is how the doppelganger is different than Cooper, and it's an exact inversion. So Cooper is, you know, Doppel Cooper chooses wants, obviously. I mean, he makes the allegiance like plain as day. But then in here, Cooper is choosing needs. It's like he'll cross lines to get to One Eye Jacks, but Cooper doesn't cross all the lines. He only crosses the ones he thinks he needs to get his answers. He says, when a man joins the Bureau, he takes an oath to uphold certain values. And, there, it's, it's kind of like how Bobby was talking about, it's like, do you take drugs, Bobby? And he's like, no. And then they say about drinking. And it's like, well, everybody drinks. It's not about being exact with the boundaries, it's being exact with the values of the boundaries. So it's being careful of the intention behind the fire. Cooper can read this one. He knows that Audrey being in his bed, he says, "This is wrong, Audrey. We both know it." And they both do. I mean, Audrey's crying. It's like um she knows what's going on. In reality, she just wants the attention in a lot of ways. She wants the validation and doesn't know quite how to do it. And, she tells him, like, it's like, well, I can't tell you all my secrets. But, and I said this a little bit earlier. I mean, she is about as completely honest as a person is on this show. It's like she wants to let him in on what she's thinking about with his investigation, and how she wants to help. And he's the one who puts the boundary there. Um, but what that ends up doing, because she's completely honest with him, is like that's her most authentic self. And yet here, um, before he goes downstairs to pick up the milkshakes or whatever it is that they're gonna snack on while he helps Audrey feel better. Um, she asks him, "Do you have any secrets?" And then he says, "No." I mean, it sounds absolutely factual to us, but I mean, it's obviously a lie. Maybe from himself he's not keeping secrets, but I mean, he keeps secrets from a lot of people over the course of this show. So I mean, he's interesting. Uh and then how did they get into this in the first place? Or like where do they go with this? Audrey says Laura had a lot of secrets. Um so she does want to know what Laura did and what secrets Laura had. And I think again it's because she kind of wants to be Laura, but she wants to find out how Laura is so special. Now, in this episode, Harley Peyton gave Cooper a lot of great material that's absolutely memorable. Another want is every day, once a day, give yourself a present. That one where he talks to Harry, and they take a moment to have a coffee. It's like it take a moment to slow down, and so it's like it's almost like a need to satisfy a little want here and there. Um, but I mean, in this case, it's like he does cross the line to use the Bookhouse Boys instead of a proper investigation to continue the proper investigation into Jock. And that's what he wants in this episode. He wants to speak to the man who's the most likely killer of Laura Palmer. Um, going into the sheriff's department after talking to Audrey in the morning, he does that little the whistle, um, which I mean, sound frequency is it invoking something? I don't know, but it was a neat little character trait at that point that Cooper liked to see the results of his whittling. But by the time he gets into the conference room where Doc Hayward and Harry are, he hears about how they're trying to figure out how to get Waldo to talk. It's to make him comfortable. It's to make him feel safe. Then he'll start playing, which is talking. So, they're going to try to coax a confession out of the bird. And that's when it comes up about the poker chip being from One-Eyed Jacks. And Hawk, comes in and says, it's like, oh, that's where Jacques works as a blackjack dealer. Um, and yeah, so instead of, like, okay, now we have to file the paperwork to, um, do this the right way and cross the border safely and legally, he says, okay, no, this looks like a thing for the Bookhouse Boys. Um, so then they go straight into disguises. It's like they get wired, which it's a secret thing. It's like people are listening through a recording. Um, but also, it's like they go in. Cooper wears the tux and the glasses, looks like Harry Grant. Blah blah blah. Big Ed, he talks about how it's like the wig might not be not the wig might not fit. He's got a big head, yeah. But then he goes in with the curly hair and the mustache, and yeah, like they go in disguise. They have gambling money. They're gonna look like that, but it's a sting operation that ends up working because even though they're not going through the proper channel, they are doing a secret thing that ends up leading exactly to Cooper's want. Because at the very end, he's at a table in front of Jacques Renault. And speaking of that, he does get into this outfit and he does work for the Bookhouse Boys and he seems absolutely unconcerned with his home life, which he is, I mean, it's established that he would rather be with Norma than Nadine. Yet here he is, walking into his house and, he sees Nadine, it's like he knew that the patent office didn't go well for her. And, she's like, well, Ed, I'm eating bonbons. It's like he knows that she's, kind of um, eating away her grief. And he does comfort her and basically say, just keep with it, keep going with it. They'll, it'll work. And yeah, this is after Chet actually shoots Montana, which is an about face from last episode's Invitation to Love. So it's like she sees Chet being an underdog that gives it to the oppressor, and then here's Big Ed talking to her, talking nice to her, and then she gets a little bit honest, confronting this dreaming that she was doing. And she says, I was going to buy a whole new life. It's like she was talking about all the things they were going to get with all this money from her silent drapes. Um, and, it's a delusional sign of an alterable reality. And that it's kind of like, like when you're stuck inside the delusion, everything seems easy and fixable. And it's like it's different than what's actually presented to you. And it's kind of interesting to see Nadine confronted by reality and then her actually acknowledging it in this episode. And we know next episode she takes that information and does the most extreme thing with it. And I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting episode for waking up. It's like Shelley, the episode before, she starts off with being all like, "Hey, Leo, I've got a gun." It's like, "Get away from me." She's just she thinks it's going to be easy to get rid of Leo, and then like she realizes that her doing the rushed thing didn't really work, and then she freaks out because she's like, oh, he's gonna kill me. It's, I mean, technically she's living in fear in a different kind of delusion because now she's like dreaming all the things bad that are gonna happen to her. But this is what she does when she's confronted with reality. And honestly, that's how Audrey started the episode with it's like she's in Cooper's bed. That's kind of like what did she think was going to happen? Well, she now knows what actually did happen, and she took that because she always she's Audrey Horne and she gets what she wants. She's used to like being active and going for things. So like instead of sitting back she acknowledged, instead of sitting back and like eating bonbons or just like crying her eyes out, she picks herself back up and gets going with it. And yeah, so she wants to be a fully realized human being who is in control of her own self, essentially. It's just, she does it so fast that it gets her into trouble. And then there's James and Donna. What do they want? They want what Laura knows so that they can both honor Laura and not be held down by her. So like they've got it from both sides with Laura's ghost. And they they essentially decide here that in order to get what they want, they kind of have to invoke Laura herself to do it. Now, every investigation in this episode reveals a side of Laura. Audrey's investigation explores who Laura was, like where she worked, what kind of job she held. Cooper's investigation explores Laura's final hours, the when and how she was killed. And then James, Donna, and Maddie's investigation reveals the person Laura was underneath while she did all these things that the other investigations are figuring out. It's interesting how the kids' investigation gets to the closest of who Laura actually was. Um, and it's all done by basically making the unspeaking speak. There's audio recordings in this episode. They're and they're both recorded by Cheryl Lee. There's Laura's therapy tape, and then there's Waldo the bird. Um, the audio tape that Laura got back from Jacoby. It's like it's basically the ghost of Laura speaking after the fact. Part of it she's talking about I feel like I'm in a dream tonight, and big bad ones that he likes, and she knows that he likes her too, and that she'll keep that a secret. So it's like it's this big confessional thing, and it it echoes the Audrey story. Audrey being basically the main character of the episode. It's like Laura says, "Why is it so easy to make men like me?" And Audrey also wants to know why it's so easy. But in this case, we get like the unofficial context of what makes it so troublesome. And then there's another ghost speaking after it had died, and the words of Waldo, the recording, the way they showed how Waldo spoke, it's like there's it's he speaks beyond the grave, but it begins okay, so the episode as far as Waldo's concerned, there's another transmission. It's a radio signal. It's the police band that Leo Johnson was listening to. Lucy's on the police band talking about the bird. She wants the bird to talk because it might have seen something, and it basically saves Bobby Briggs right there. But it absolutely seals the deal on Waldo. Um, so um, and Leo, he's definitely um, equated with the darkness here. I mean, one, we see him trying to kill people. Shelley says he sounded like an animal, which is words exactly used by Sarah talking about Bob. Um, and, it's like all this stuff leads to Waldo being killed. But then, Cooper's micro cassette recorder, like we actually get to hear after the fact, just like James, Donna, and Maddie are hearing Laura's words after the fact. They get to the police guys get to listen to um, Waldo say, "Leo, no, hurting me." So yeah, and the guy who sounds like an animal, um, who decides to kill a bird who might implicate him absolutely was implicated, and it puts Leo at the scene of the crime. Now, Laura isn't just invoked this time through recordings. I mean, this is this is one where James and Donna and Maddie all absolutely take it to a whole new level. I mean, it's more theatrical, obviously, but like Maddie becomes Laura, which is, the Cheryl Lee connection, like the Maddie has been set up almost like a vessel for Laura, like the connections they have already make it easy for her to become Laura. And in a lot of ways, like becoming Laura is almost like a crime noir twist on the whole Orpheus thing. It's like they go in to where Laura is and bring her back into the world almost. Um, it's not exactly Orpheus going all the way into the underworld to get his wife back, but I mean, it's not entirely dissimilar. It's like they go in to bring Laura back so that we can find out how she was killed. And Maddie really embodies Laura. It's like, first of all, she dresses the part, which, she can do because she's got Laura's closet. And then, she raises the pitch of her voice up here, like where Laura usually speaks. And it's interesting for her in particular to do that because she's kind of doing the Audrey thing where, she's going into this persona that is way darker than she is. Um, Cheryl Lee in Essential Wrapped in Plastic by John Thorne, she says, excuse me, she says, Maddie didn't walk on the dark side like Laura did. She was completely naive of any sort of world like Laura's. And yet here she is calling Jacoby from a payphone saying, it's like, I feel like I'm in a dream tonight, or, what's up, doc? Um, it's like this huge elaborate ruse. They're almost like crafting a dream for Jacoby to fall into. And it in a lot of ways does bring Laura back to life. and they're doing it to reclaim more of her words and more of her truth. But it's like they're 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 invoking the dead to reclaim more of the dead. And I mean, except that you can't really do that, and it doesn't work because in the video that they've given to Jacoby, um, they their ruse can't work because the part of the film, it's like he pauses it at a particular moment and sees the gazebo, and he says gazebo. So like we know that Jacoby knows something can be investigated, and he goes ahead and does it. And honestly, it's all of a piece. I mean, because at the end of the episode, James and Donna, what do they want? They want to get Laura's other tapes. So they've broken and entered, and they are right at the edge of finding that tape. But it's like, what does their rushing do? It ends up leaving Maddie at Donna's station wagon, because Donna drove. So, like you can't, Maddie can't use Donna's car for whatever reason. And, she's stuck there with somebody, breathing heavy. Like, she's in danger. Jacoby, it's like he left in a hurry and he's in danger because, next episode he's going to get clobbered into a heart attack. Um, Audrey and Cooper going to One-Eyed Jack's, that's already associated with the Red Room in Lynch's episode, the one with the dream sequence. It's like it's going into the heart of the beast in a lot of ways. And Laura's invoked by Maddie. They talked about that part. It's like all this accessing other realms, and Jacoby's office even fits into this because it's an illegal entry. It's accessing these realms that you're not really supposed to go to achieve goals, and everybody's doing it, but everybody's rushing and cutting corners. And I mean, the Margaret would say the fish aren't running, and it's like everybody gets into various troubles as a result of their lack of patience. All the trouble that we'll see, it begins in next episode, which means right now it's time for the sign off. You have been listening to the Blue Rose Task Force podcast, a production of Ruminations Radio Network and TV Obsessive Radio. If you resonate with what you're hearing, please subscribe, rate, and review our show, and we would love to be connected with you on Twitter at Blue Rose TF Pod and on Instagram and Facebook at Blue Rose Task Force. You can find me at JPB_Little on Twitter and John_the_Peaky on Instagram. Visit ruminationsradionetwork.com for additional great shows such as Ruminations from the Red Room and Cinephile Hissy Fits. Find any number of classic 25YL Twin Peaks articles and content on many other TV shows at tvobsessive.com. And if you want to be part of our monthly mailbag Patreon episodes, send any comments and questions or feedback to Blue Rose Task Force Podcast at gmail.com. I'll see you next week as we cover episode 7, the 8th overall episode of Twin Peaks. And until then, listeners, I'll see you in my dreams.
And it's a mystery.
I wish you the best of luck.
It's a way to kind of deepen and expand the universe that the show takes place in. They'll really dig it. This is a gift to all the fans.
Golden sunshine all along